My name is Diane. I'm 68 years old, and until a few weeks ago, I thought I knew what family meant. I was married to Hank for 50 years, half a century. We met in high school. He played the trombone, I worked in the library, and from then on, we were just us. We raised 2 children, built a life from scratch in a modest colonial in upstate New York, and stayed together through recessions, layoffs, cancer scares, and every little ordinary miracle that makes up a marriage. He had this laugh that could crack open the coldest room, and even toward the end, when the doctors said his lungs were failing, he still found ways to make me laugh. He passed away on a Tuesday morning in April. I sat beside his hospice bed, held his hand, and whispered, "You can rest now, love. I'll be okay." I believed it when I said it, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. The funeral was beautiful. The church was packed with neighbors, old bowling buddies, former co-workers. Even his old army pal flew in from Phoenix. I gave the eulogy myself. My voice only cracked once. That night, I went home exhausted and hollow. Grief is strange like that. It doesn't scream. It just presses in, quiet and heavy. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw something that stopped me cold. Tables, chairs, people, a neon orange estate sale today sign staked into our front lawn. My heart didn't just break, it turned to ash. They were selling Hank's things. His vintage baseball glove, his record collection, the 1949 Lionel train set he tuned every December, his tools, still smelling of pine and grease. Gone. All gone. While I was burying the love of my life, my children were out here pricing him down to nickels. That day, something inside me shifted. Not just pain, something colder. Still, they thought they knew who I was. They were wrong. We lived in a modest blue and white colonial just off Maple Lane, the kind of house with azalea bushes out front and a swing Hank rebuilt every spring like clockwork. "Some things are worth keeping," he used to say, even when his knees ached bending over old wood. He was like that, sentimental, stubborn, and loyal to the bone. When he passed, the house felt foreign. I would walk into a room and forget why. The walls, once filled with the sound of his humming, or sports radio, or him calling, "Hon, where's the coffee?" They were suddenly still. The silence was too loud, like it was mocking me. My children insisted on moving in to help with the arrangements. Brian arrived first, towing his wife Vanessa and their teen son, who barely looked up from his phone. Meredith came next, trailing her husband Chase and a cloud of Chanel. I told myself it would be nice, having family around, but from the moment they walked in, it felt less like mourning and more like management. Brian immediately began reorganizing the garage. "Just trying to make space," he said, as he quietly boxed up Hank's old tools. Vanessa wandered around the living room taking photos, for memory books, she claimed. Meredith asked where we kept the safe deposit key and if Dad had finalized anything legal before the end. I tried to laugh it off. "We're not even through the funeral," I said. They just smiled politely, like I was being sentimental. They were polite, always. Too polite. Like customers talking to the clerk at an antique store. Friendly, but not personal. They said they were here for me, but it felt like they were here for what was left of Hank. At night, I could hear them whispering in the kitchen after they thought I'd gone to bed. Words like liquidate, probate, and split evenly filtered through the vents. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to my children talk about my life like it was a checklist. The morning after the will was read, Meredith didn't ask if I was okay. She asked if I planned to sell the house. Brian suggested I downsize and take the burden off myself. Chase casually mentioned how real estate's hot right now, especially if you don't wait too long. They were planning something. I felt it in my bones. But I didn't confront them. I didn't scream or cry. I just made coffee like always. Because for 50 years, Hank and I had dealt with everything side by side, with dignity. And even though he was gone, I wasn't about to lose that now. What I didn't know then was that the real betrayal wasn't just brewing, it was already on the calendar. The morning after the service, I woke to the sound of voices, hurried, muffled, but urgent. I stepped into the hallway, still in my robe, and saw Brian at the bottom of the stairs with Chase. They didn't see me. Brian was pointing at the garage door. The tools alone are worth a couple grand. And the snowblower? Practically unused. Chase rubbed his chin. You'll need to act before probate gets messy. She's old school, sentimental. That stuff's just clutter to her, but it's liquid to us. That word again. Liquid. Like my life, my memories, could be boiled down and poured into a checking account. I stepped back before they noticed me and closed the bedroom door. My hand trembled as I reached for the edge of the dresser to steady myself. Later that day, Meredith brought me tea and sat on the bed like we were college roommates. She spoke gently, but I've always known when my daughter is performing. "Mom," she said, "I think it would help if you let us take some of Dad's things off your hands. It's too soon for you to be surrounded by all these memories. It's unhealthy." I looked at her. I'm not ready to part with anything yet. She offered a sympathetic smile, the kind people give when they think you're delusional. Just think about it, okay? It's for your own good. In the days that followed, they began moving things around. Furniture disappeared for cleaning. Hank's cufflink box vanished from the bedroom dresser. The garage grew noticeably emptier. When I asked about it, Brian said, "We're just organizing. You seemed overwhelmed." I felt like a guest in my own home. Vanessa brought up a financial planner she knew, someone who specializes in helping widows. Meredith started printing out brochures for active adult communities in Florida. Chase asked if I'd considered what to do with Dad's coin collection, since the market's hot for rare silver right now. I tried to stand firm. I really did. But grief plays tricks on you. You start doubting yourself. Maybe I was being irrational. Maybe I did need help. And wasn't it better to be surrounded by people, even calculating ones, than to be alone with the kind of sorrow that makes your bones ache? Then came the lie. One evening, I overheard Brian talking on the phone in the kitchen. He didn't know I was on the back porch just behind the screen door. "No, she's not doing well," he said. "Loses track of time. Forgot Hank had passed last week. I think she's slipping. Might be time to step in legally." My mouth went dry. I backed away, the screen door creaking slightly. He paused, then lowered his voice. The next morning, Meredith left a brochure on the breakfast table. "Elder Law and You, Protecting Your Loved Ones When They Can't Protect Themselves." I stared at it for 5 full minutes. That same afternoon, I noticed the locked file drawer in Hank's old roll-top desk had been forced open. Papers were missing, documents, insurance forms, our marriage certificate even. Brian claimed he'd been looking for Dad's military discharge papers, but I knew better. That drawer hadn't been touched in 20 years, until now. I confronted them, quietly, in the kitchen, after dinner. "I don't like people going through Hank's things without asking." Brian looked up from his phone. "You're grieving, Mom. We're just trying to help." Meredith chimed in, arms crossed. "Honestly, the stress is affecting your memory. You forgot to take your meds yesterday." I hadn't. I was being gaslit in my own kitchen. They framed their intrusion as care, their manipulation as love. And the worst part? Part of me wanted to believe them, because the alternative, that my children were preparing to strip me of everything, was too awful to accept. But something had shifted. I could feel it in the air, like static before a storm. Something was coming, and I was starting to understand just how alone I really was. Hank's funeral was on a Thursday. The sky was that kind of white-gray that offers no comfort, no warmth, just a hollow ceiling above the world. I wore his favorite navy scarf around my shoulders, the one he said made me look like I belonged in a French movie. His wedding band was in my coat pocket. I couldn't bear to leave it on him. The service was beautiful, simple, just how he would have wanted. Old hymns, quiet tears, stories from men who served with him in Vietnam, and a few chuckles about how obsessed he was with keeping his tools in perfect, blasted, alphabetical order. I even made it through the eulogy without breaking down. Hank had always said I was the strongest woman he knew. That day, I tried to be. After the burial, I lingered at the cemetery long after the guests had left. I didn't want to go home. Not yet. Home meant finality. Home meant facing the quiet. When I finally did pull into the driveway just before dusk, I thought I had taken a wrong turn. Cars were parked on the lawn. Strangers wandered around with tote bags. My front door was wide open, and through it I saw movement, tables, displays, voices laughing. I parked crooked and ran. There was a card table in the foyer, covered with cash, a cigar box for change, and a sign written in marker. Estate sale. Cash only. They hadn't even waited until the weekend. I stumbled through the house like a stranger in a nightmare. My husband's possessions, his entire life, had been tagged and priced like clearance items. His antique compass collection was laid out next to the microwave. His golf clubs were gone. The old rocking chair where he used to read the paper had a sold sticker on the seat. Even our wedding china was being bubble-wrapped by a woman I didn't recognize. I found Meredith in the dining room, rearranging glassware. "What is this?" My voice came out hoarse, hollow. She turned slowly, like I'd interrupted her grocery shopping. "Oh, you're back." Brian appeared behind her, holding a clipboard. "Mom, listen. We didn't think you should come home to all this clutter. It was too much. We took care of it for you." I just stared. "Took care of it?" "It's what Dad would have wanted," Meredith added. "He hated leaving things undone." "No," I whispered. This is theft." Brian's tone sharpened. "It's called responsibility, Mom. You're overwhelmed. We're stepping in." They didn't even deny it. They truly believed they were entitled to everything. As if my grief, my years, my marriage meant nothing in the face of their convenience and greed. I left. I don't remember how. The next thing I recall, I was parked at the lake Hank used to fish at, gripping the steering wheel like it was keeping me tethered to the earth. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't speak a word. Something inside me had broken, but something else had awakened. Hank's funeral was on a Thursday. The sky was that kind of white-gray that offers no comfort, no warmth, just a hollow ceiling above the world. I wore his favorite navy scarf around my shoulders, the one he said made me look like I belonged in a French movie. His wedding band was in my coat pocket. I couldn't bear to leave it on him. The service was beautiful, simple, just how he would have wanted. Old hymns, quiet tears, stories from men who served with him in Vietnam, and a few chuckles about how obsessed he was with keeping his tools in perfect, blasted, alphabetical order. I even made it through the eulogy without breaking down. Hank had always said I was the strongest woman he knew. That day, I tried to be. After the burial, I lingered at the cemetery long after the guests had left. I didn't want to go home. Not yet. Home meant finality. Home meant facing the quiet. When I finally did pull into the driveway just before dusk, I thought I had taken a wrong turn. Cars were parked on the lawn. Strangers wandered around with tote bags. My front door was wide open, and through it I saw movement, tables, displays, voices laughing. I parked crooked and ran. There was a card table in the foyer, covered with cash, a cigar box for change, and a sign written in marker. Estate sale. Cash only. They hadn't even waited until the weekend. I stumbled through the house like a stranger in a nightmare. My husband's possessions, his entire life, had been tagged and priced like clearance items. His antique compass collection was laid out next to the microwave. His golf clubs were gone. The old rocking chair where he used to read the paper had a sold sticker on the seat. Even our wedding china was being bubble-wrapped by a woman I didn't recognize. I found Meredith in the dining room, rearranging glassware. "What is this?" My voice came out hoarse, hollow. She turned slowly, like I'd interrupted her grocery shopping. "Oh, you're back." Brian appeared behind her, holding a clipboard. "Mom, listen. We didn't think you should come home to all this clutter. It was too much. We took care of it for you." I just stared. "Took care of it?" "It's what Dad would have wanted," Meredith added. "He hated leaving things undone." "No," I whispered. This is theft." Brian's tone sharpened. "It's called responsibility, Mom. You're overwhelmed. We're stepping in." They didn't even deny it. They truly believed they were entitled to everything. As if my grief, my years, my marriage meant nothing in the face of their convenience and greed. I left. I don't remember how. The next thing I recall, I was parked at the lake Hank used to fish at, gripping the steering wheel like it was keeping me tethered to the earth. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't speak a word. Something inside me had broken, but something else had awakened. It was 1998. The spring Meredith turned 16, and everything we had built as a family was hanging by a thread. The plant where Hank worked had just announced layoffs, not downsizing, gutting. 17 years of seniority meant nothing when the machines were newer and the kids fresh out of trade school were willing to take half the pay. They gave him a cardboard box and a severance check that barely covered 2 months of mortgage. We didn't tell the kids how bad it was. Not at first. We still had spaghetti on the stove. Hank still whistled in the mornings, and I still left the porch light on like always. But under the surface, we were cracking. Brian was already in college, NYU, a private school we couldn't afford but couldn't say no to. Hank had cried in the car after dropping him off his freshman year, but we both agreed. You don't tell your child to aim high and then clip their wings when they do. So when Meredith came home one afternoon, breathless and giddy, with a manila envelope clutched to her chest, I knew something had to give. "Mom!" she shouted. "I got it. I got into the conservatory in Boston, the summer program, vocal training, theater, everything." I smiled, pulling her into a hug, even though my heart felt like a stone. I knew the cost. I had read the brochure weeks ago when she first applied, memorizing every line of the tuition breakdown like it might magically shrink if I stared hard enough. $4,800 for the session, not including room, meals, or travel. We had maybe $300 in the bank. But she was beaming. She twirled around the kitchen like Maria from The Sound of Music, chattering about voice coaches and dorms and weekend showcases. I sat at the table, listening, nodding, clutching my teacup so tightly I left crescent-shaped dents in the ceramic. That night, I lay in bed beside Hank, neither of us asleep. "We can't afford it," he said softly, staring at the ceiling. "I know." Silence. "Maybe," I whispered. "Maybe it's time." He turned toward me. "Time for what?" I couldn't meet his eyes. "I could sell Mom's ring, the one she left me." He didn't answer for a long moment. Then gently, "You've never even worn it." "Because it's not mine. It's hers. She wore it every Sunday, Hank. Every Sunday of her life." "You were saving it for Meredith's wedding." Maybe this is her wedding, her dream, her leap. The next morning, I took the ring to a jeweler in Poughkeepsie. He appraised it silently, turning it over under a loupe, and offered me $4,200 on the spot. I said yes. We made up the difference with what little was left in our emergency fund. Hank took on odd jobs, fixing fences, painting garages, even laying tile for one of Brian's old classmates who had just bought a condo. We never told Meredith, never told either of them. When we dropped her off at the conservatory dorms that June, she barely looked back. She was already buzzing with energy, hugging new friends, talking about monologue assignments. She kissed us both goodbye, but didn't see the way I held Hank's hand all the way back to the car, like I was drowning. That summer was hard. We skipped anniversaries, stopped going out to dinner, even put off getting our roof repaired when a thunderstorm peeled back half the shingles. We made do with tarps and prayer, but the letters she sent from Boston, they made it all worth it. "Mom," she wrote once, "we had a master class with a woman who toured with Les Mis. She said my voice had depth. Can you believe that? Me?" Yes, baby. I could believe it, because I had believed in you every day of your life. Back in the motel room, years later, I pulled out one of those letters, still folded in the back pocket of an old cookbook I'd kept with me. I hadn't even remembered bringing it. I smoothed the creases and reread her words. They felt like relics from another life. That ring, my mother's ring, was never replaced. Meredith never knew what I gave up. And maybe that's the point of sacrifice. It's not a gift if you demand acknowledgement. It's love when it's quiet, invisible, given without receipt. I folded the letter and slid it back between the yellowing pages. My hands shook a little, but not from grief this time, from anger. How do children forget? How do they take and take until nothing's left, and then look at you like you were the one who failed? I thought of Brian's voice on the phone. "She's slipping." I thought of Meredith's text about $3,842 I had given them everything, and they had sold me for scrap. On the 6th morning, I woke before the sun. There was a chill in the motel room, the kind that seeps through thin walls and lingers in your bones. I wrapped myself in Hank's cardigan and shuffled to the small table by the window, cradling a cup of bitter coffee from the lobby machine. That's when I saw it. Tucked into the side pocket of my overnight bag was a manila envelope, thick, worn at the edges, my name written on the front in Hank's shaky, familiar script. I stared at it for a full minute before reaching for it, my fingers trembling. I hadn't packed this. At least, I didn't think I had. Inside was a letter, folded once. Beneath it, a key. The letter was dated 6 months before he died. "My Diane, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I know our kids, you're probably surrounded by confusion, opinions, and noise. I hate that I won't be there to shield you from it. So here's what I did. You remember that storage unit we used when we were fixing up the basement? Unit number 117 off Route 29. I kept it. Quietly. Paid for it every year in cash. Inside, you'll find what I couldn't trust the world with. Not the bank, not the will, not even them. It's all yours. Everything important. Everything I meant for you to have. Not what's left over. What's yours. You spent your whole life taking care of other people. Let this be the one time you take care of yourself first. And don't you dare feel guilty about it. I love you. I always loved you. And I trust you to finish this right. Hank." I read it twice, 3 times. The words blurred through tears, but not the kind I'd cried in the days before. This was different, fierce, hot. I clutched the key, cold and sharp in my palm, and something inside me clicked. They hadn't just taken Hank's belongings, they had tried to erase me from my own story. But Hank, he had known. He had seen it coming, and he had left me a way out, a way through. I didn't know exactly what was in that storage unit. Money, papers, jewelry, tools. But I knew this. It was the one thing my children didn't know about. Couldn't touch, couldn't twist. It was mine. And for the first time in days, I stood up straight. I opened the motel room curtains. I let the morning sun fall across my face, tired and lined and alive. I was done waiting for someone to save me. Hank had handed me the torch. Now it was my turn to carry it. The storage facility off Route 29 hadn't changed since the early 2000s. The same dented sign, same keypad rusted from too many winters. I pulled in slowly, heart thudding, scanning the row numbers until I found it. Unit 117. It looked no different than the others. Just a red metal door, locked and silent. But in my palm, the key Hank had left me felt warm, real. A thread pulled taut through time. I unlocked the padlock, lifted the door, and stared into the past. There were no piles of junk, no old furniture or broken electronics. Inside was a neat, compact arrangement. A steel shelving unit on one side, a sealed fireproof box in the corner, a wooden chest Hank had built himself in '84, and a folding table with one worn banker's box on top. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, the sound echoing like a vault sealing shut. I started with the banker's box. On top was a folder labeled Diane for after in Hank's blocky printing. Inside, I found a thick stack of documents, original copies of our marriage license, Hank's military discharge papers, insurance policies I thought were long gone, and, my breath caught, a deed for 10 acres of land in Greene County, in my name, bought in 2009. There was a note clipped to it. You always said you wanted a little cabin by the water. If I couldn't build it for you in time, I figured this was the next best thing. It's zoned for residential. Good investment, too. I sat down on the cold concrete floor. For a few moments, I just held the papers to my chest, overcome. He had planned all this, quietly, carefully, while I'd been chasing kids to dentist appointments and fighting with utility companies over late fees. Hank had been building me a parachute. The fireproof box took more effort to open, but inside was the punch I hadn't seen coming. $38,000 in cash, neatly stacked, rubber banded, some bills crisp, others faded with time. And beneath the money, a velvet pouch holding the sapphire pendant Hank had given me on our 20th anniversary, the one I thought I'd lost years ago. A second note was tucked beside it. Don't let them make you small. You are not a leftover. You are the whole damn meal. I laughed, actually laughed. Out loud, alone in that metal box. My Hank. Even from the grave, still writing the kind of poetry only a plumber from the Hudson Valley could. But the best was in the wooden chest. Inside were his journals. I hadn't even known he kept any. 3 leather-bound volumes, each carefully dated and organized. I flipped through the first page and immediately saw an entry from just after Brian's wedding. I'm worried about the way he talks to Diane, like she's furniture that came with the house. She's not saying anything, but I see the way her shoulders shrink when he's around. I won't let her be erased. Page after page, year after year, Hank had written down everything. Observations, frustrations, conversations, financial notes, suspicions, even copies of emails and text logs, printed and dated. He had documented the entire arc of our family's decline into entitlement, and he had done it with precision. He wasn't just giving me an inheritance, he was giving me ammunition. And that's when I realized something. They didn't just steal from me, they underestimated me. I had in my hands proof of assets they didn't know existed, cash that bypassed probate, property they couldn't touch, and written records that revealed their intentions years before Hank passed. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't alone. And most importantly, I wasn't done. That night, I drove back to the motel with the banker's box in the passenger seat, like it was sacred. I didn't sleep. I stayed up making lists, reading, planning. By dawn, I had 3 names circled in my notebook. 1, an estate lawyer Hank had scribbled in his journal beside the words, "Not a crook." 2, a retired sheriff's deputy who now worked in private investigations. 3, a quiet little credit union 2 towns over, where the money would go unnoticed until I decided what to do next. I didn't cry anymore, not because I wasn't heartbroken, but because now I had a mission. The first call I made was to the estate lawyer listed in Hank's journal. His name was Edward Castle, and his office was tucked above a bookstore on Main Street in a sleepy river town 40 minutes south. The receptionist sounded young and skeptical until I dropped Hank's name. Her tone shifted immediately. "Mr. Castle's been expecting you," she said. Expecting me? I arrived the next morning, still wearing the same heavy coat I'd lived in for a week. Edward Castle was tall, white-haired, and had the kind of quiet manner that made you feel like nothing could surprise him. When I introduced myself, he smiled kindly and motioned for me to sit. "I wondered when you'd come," he said. He pulled out a manila folder. Another one. Inside were documents Hank had drawn up nearly 2 years before. A living trust, naming me as sole trustee, a clause that explicitly removed both Brian and Meredith from any access to assets not already distributed at the time of death, even notarized letters describing their emerging pattern of coercion. "I told your husband he was being dramatic," Castle admitted. "Turns out he was just early." He helped me set up the new trust account under my name. We transferred the funds from the credit union. He filed a request to freeze all remaining estate disbursements until a full review could be conducted, quietly, legally, irrevocably. Next was the investigator, Detective Wallace Kramer, retired sheriff turned PI. Big hands, quiet eyes. I met him at a diner over black coffee and a slice of pie. He read through the photocopies of Hank's journals like he was reviewing case evidence, nodding slowly, jotting notes in a little spiral pad. "They've been planning a power grab for years," he said. "I see it all the time in elder cases. This is just dressed up in family language." He offered to run background checks on Chase and Vanessa, just in case, and to keep an eye on any credit pulls or property activity that might indicate they were trying to move fast. I nodded. I want to stay ahead of them. By the end of that week, the pieces were falling into place. A new mailing address at a P.O. box in Castle's town. A burner phone, paid in cash, used only for calls related to the trust. Bank access locked behind 2-factor authentication. Alerts set on any attempt to alter Hank's death certificate, claim insurance, or access our Social Security benefits. I moved with caution but clarity. Every errand had purpose. Every form I signed had weight. It was exhausting, but it was also electrifying. For the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting. I was creating the path. At night, I returned to the motel and went through Hank's journals again, carefully copying certain entries into a separate binder. The ones about Brian's coercion, Meredith's manipulation, their escalating disrespect. It was painful to read, but necessary. This wasn't just revenge, it was protection. One entry hit me like a blow. "She won't see it until it's too late." That's what scares me. She always wants to believe the best in them. She gives too much grace. Not anymore. I contacted a small real estate firm in Greene County. The land Hank had bought? Still undeveloped, but its value had nearly doubled. I made an appointment to visit it in person and asked the firm to begin quiet inquiries into building options. Nothing extravagant, just something mine. By the end of the second week, I felt like a woman with a compass again. They didn't know. They didn't suspect. As far as Brian and Meredith were concerned, I was still licking my wounds in some grief-soaked corner, too disoriented to challenge them. Let them think that. Because while they squabbled over scraps, I was laying bricks, and soon they'd realize I hadn't disappeared. I had simply stepped off stage. It happened on a Tuesday morning, cold, clear, and quiet, the kind of morning Hank would have taken as a sign. I dressed carefully, nothing flashy, just a navy wool coat, the sapphire pendant under my collar, and my mother's wedding ring on a chain around my neck. It felt right, like armor. At 8:57 a.m., I stood outside the county clerk's office with a sealed manila envelope in my hand. Inside it, a notarized affidavit outlining years of coercion. Scanned copies of Hank's journals, flagged with tabs. A request to freeze the final transfer of assets pending investigation of undue influence. And a formal declaration removing Brian and Meredith as legal representatives in any estate-related matters. I had spoken with Mr. Castle the day before. He had prepped the paperwork. "All you need to do," he'd said, "is hand it in. Once it's filed, it becomes public record and legally binding." I stepped inside. The woman at the window took the envelope, smiled politely, and stamped it with a date and time. "You're all set," she said. "Anything else I can help with?" I almost laughed. That was it. No fireworks, no dramatic music, just one paper sliding across a counter. But I walked out of that building straighter than I had in weeks, because the dominoes were now in motion. By noon, Castle had sent formal notifications to the estate bank, the probate court, and both of my children. He CC'd me on the emails. Subject line, "Petitioner has filed for asset protection and reallocation." That afternoon I sent 2 more messages. One to Brian. "All decisions regarding Dad's estate are now under legal review. Please direct future communication to my attorney. Do not contact me personally." And one to Meredith. "Your access to estate funds has been revoked. All further use of family property without consent will be considered a legal violation. No emotion, no invitation to argue, just facts." And then, just before sunset, I made one last call to the real estate agent in Greene County. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's start building." There was a long pause. Then, "We'll get the permits submitted this week. You'll have your own place by fall." My own place. Not a guest room. Not a corner of someone else's house. Not a memory-laden shell filled with ghosts and stolen heirlooms. Mine. I hung up and stood in the window of the motel room, looking out across the parking lot at the horizon. The sun was dipping low, casting gold over the tops of the trees. I imagined Hank standing beside me, arms crossed, nodding once like he always did when a job was done right. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. They had treated me like a relic to be managed, a sentimental inconvenience. But they'd forgotten one crucial thing. I was still alive. Brian was the first to feel it. It started with a declined card at the auto repair shop. He'd taken the SUV in for brake work, nothing major. But when the technician ran his Amex, it beeped and flashed red. "Try it again," Brian said, already irritated. "It's a business account." The man tried again, declined, then the Visa, then the debit. Brian's face flushed red. There's got to be some kind of mistake. But there wasn't. At least not for him. He went home fuming, Vanessa trailing behind him, fingers flying across her phone. He logged into the joint family account and stared in disbelief. The balance was frozen. Every transfer attempt, every automated payment, blocked. Next came the email from Cassell's office. Due to ongoing investigations into potential estate fraud and coercion, all disbursements and access privileges associated with the probate process have been suspended until further notice. He reread it 3 times, each word pressing against his chest like a weight. In a house 2 neighborhoods away, Meredith was pacing the kitchen barefoot, phone pressed to her ear, voice rising. "No, I'm telling you, I am a primary heir. I was there the day the will was signed." The bank manager remained cool on the other end. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Adler. The trust account has been legally revised. We cannot authorize access without consent from the trustee, Diane Calhoun." There it was, that name, that impossibly calm, suddenly untouchable woman they had so thoroughly dismissed. Meredith slammed the phone down and turned to Chase, who stood at the island with a glass of whiskey and a blank expression. "She's cutting us out." "She already has," he said. Panic rose like steam. Meredith pulled open drawers, rifling through folders. "Where's the copy of the will? Where's the power of attorney form? We had control, didn't we?" But Chase wasn't listening. He was staring at the TV, where a breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Real estate fraud case opens probate dispute in Hudson Valley. Former trustees under review." He turned up the volume. The anchor read from a statement. "A local estate has been halted mid-distribution due to what court documents describe as a pattern of financial coercion and asset misappropriation against a senior widow. Investigators cite detailed journals left by the deceased, as well as recorded communications under review by the probate court." Meredith froze. "Oh my God," she whispered. She didn't know whether to scream or throw up. Chase finally moved, pouring another drink. Back at Brian's, Vanessa was locked in their bedroom, sobbing over Zillow listings she could no longer afford. Their down payment, drawn from early estate access, was now under review. The escrow account frozen. The sellers had backed out that morning. "It's all falling apart," she said through tears. "You said your mother wouldn't fight back." Brian stood silently, watching the spinning circle on his phone as he tried again to log into the shared investment portal. Access denied. He picked up his phone and called Diane. Voicemail. He tried again, straight to voicemail. He typed out a text. "Mom, what the hell is going on? We need to talk. Call me." No response. Not that day. Not the next. He left voicemails, each more frantic than the last. Then came the emails. First polite, then pleading, then angry. He never got a reply. Diane was no longer reacting. She was gone from their reach. Untouchable, and the first domino had fallen. 3 days after the accounts were frozen, Brian showed up unannounced at Meredith's house. He didn't knock. He pounded. Chase answered the door, shirtless and annoyed. "You couldn't call?" Brian pushed past him. "Where is she?" Meredith was on the couch, surrounded by papers. Bank statements, printed emails, legal notices, 6 highlighters bleeding through every page. "She's not answering any of my calls," Brian barked. "Do you have any idea what's going on? What did you say to her?" Meredith didn't look up. "Me? You're the one who told her she was slipping. You planted that seed." "Because she was," Brian snapped. "She forgot Hank's life insurance pin." "She was grieving, you jackass." "Oh, but selling Dad's record player for $40 on Facebook Marketplace? That was fine?" Meredith threw her highlighter across the room. "I didn't sell it. Chase did." Chase raised an eyebrow. "Don't drag me into this. I told you both it was too soon to start moving things." "Too soon?" Brian laughed bitterly. "She was never going to give us anything. You think she didn't know what we were doing? You think she just forgot to write us into the trust? Hank set this up before he even died. Meredith stood now. Well, maybe if you hadn't treated her like a toddler with dementia, she wouldn't have cut us out entirely. And maybe if you hadn't been filming goddamn skincare videos in the living room during Dad's hospice care, she wouldn't have thought we were monsters. They were shouting now, face to face, years of buried resentment clawing their way up. You were always her favorite, Brian growled, and you were always Dad's. Well, at least I didn't beg them to pay off my credit cards after my divorce. At least I didn't skip Christmas 3 years in a row because my wife couldn't stand being bored. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, mascara smudged. If I'd known what kind of circus this family was, I would have stayed in Scottsdale. Chase muttered, Then maybe you should have. She turned to Meredith. You promised me that house. You said the money was guaranteed. And it was, Meredith shrieked, before Mom lost her damn mind. No, Brian cut in. She didn't lose her mind. She woke up. Silence. It hung there like fog. They had underestimated her, dismissed her, planned around her. And now? She was a ghost with power. I need access to the rest of the journals, Brian said suddenly. The ones Hank wrote. Meredith narrowed her eyes. What journals? The ones he kept. He used to write things down. He said it helped him think. He probably recorded everything. I haven't seen any journals. Then where are they? Why would I know? They stared at each other, a new tension forming, one not born of guilt or loss, but fear. What if she has them? Meredith whispered. What if she's building a case? Brian ran a hand through his hair. She already filed the freeze. What's next? Civil litigation? A restraining order? Public statements? Chase sat down heavily. You think she'd go that far? She doesn't have to, Brian said. She's already winning. Meredith sat down, deflated. Her posture sagged under the weight of a truth she could no longer outrun. Do you think she's really gone? Like, from us? She's not gone, Brian said. She's watching. She's waiting. And she's never going to let us back in. They were quiet for a long time after that. No one made a plan. No one suggested an apology. Because some bridges, when they burn, don't leave ashes. They leave nothing. The foreclosure notice hit Brian's mailbox on a Thursday. Bold black letters across the top. Final notice, eviction pending. He stood in the driveway, still in his office clothes, reading it over and over like he could will the words into something else. The home equity loan he'd taken, based on an expected inheritance, was now in default. The bank had been patient, but with the estate frozen and their accounts scrutinized, the paperwork caught up. He didn't go inside. He couldn't. Vanessa was already in a rage spiral over losing the Scottsdale house. The last time he brought up the word downsizing, she smashed a Pyrex casserole dish. He slept in the garage that night. Meredith fared no better. 2 days after the foreclosure letter, she was served at her front door. A process server, polite and robotic, handed her a thick envelope stamped from the county court. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Statement of intent to investigate fraudulent misuse of estate property. Accompanying declaration of witness logs and documentation. Inside was a printed log, pages and pages of excerpts from Hank's journals. Quotes, dates, annotations, observations, even photocopied screenshots of old emails where she and Brian had discussed pre-clearing assets before the funeral. She dropped the papers onto the floor and backed away as if they'd burned her. Chase came home to find her curled on the kitchen tile, eyes glassy. I'm going to lose everything, she whispered. Mom's going to bury us. No, he said quietly. She already has. Over the next 2 weeks, the walls kept closing in. Brian's credit was destroyed. His license to operate as a financial consultant was put on temporary suspension pending investigation. Clients dropped him within days of the local news coverage, especially after one article quoted an anonymous legal source describing a coordinated financial manipulation targeting a grieving spouse. Meredith lost brand deals. Her online presence, carefully curated for years, soured overnight. Screenshots of her posts during the hospice weeks began circulating. One comment, particularly vicious, read, "Imagine filming a contour tutorial while your dad is dying. Gross." She deleted all her accounts. Chase moved into his brother's basement. Vanessa went back to Scottsdale. And slowly, like a slow-motion implosion, the illusion cracked completely. The house Brian and Meredith grew up in, the place they thought they'd inherited, was no longer theirs to touch. Everything inside had been re-inventoried, secured, and locked behind layers of legal protections Diane had set up weeks before. The trust named an independent firm as custodian. Nothing could be sold, nothing could be moved. The land in Greene County, already in development, the cash, gone from their reach. The name Calhoun, now whispered in their circles with phrases like court case, frozen assets, and probate disaster. They stopped calling Diane, not because they finally understood, but because they finally realized she wasn't bluffing. She had meant every silence, every delay, every refusal. And now they had to live with the echo of it. Every door they once assumed would open, now locked. Every safety net they thought would catch them, gone. Every smile they'd faked at her funeral, now turned inside out. They were left with the only thing she had never taken from them, themselves. And for the first time in their adult lives, they had to face who that really was. The cabin wasn't grand. It wasn't supposed to be. It had 2 bedrooms, a screened-in porch, and a fireplace Hank would have loved for its simple brickwork and old-fashioned hearth. The property sat at the edge of a low hill in Greene County, sloping gently down toward a quiet stream. The land smelled of pine and soil and peace. I moved in during the first week of October. The leaves had just started turning, a blaze of copper and crimson across the treetops, the kind of riotous beauty that makes you feel both small and infinite. I arrived with 3 suitcases, a banker's box, and one framed photo of Hank from our honeymoon, propped carefully in the front seat like a co-pilot. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The builders had left a bottle of local red wine on the kitchen counter with a welcome note. The cabinets were empty, the fridge bare. The water heater was finicky, and the floors creaked in the corner of the bedroom. But for the first time in months, maybe years, I slept through the night. The next morning I made coffee the way Hank liked it, percolated, dark, no sugar. I stood barefoot on the back porch, cradling the mug in both hands, and watched the mist lift off the trees. It was quiet in a different way than the old house had been. Not hollow or mournful. This quiet had breath to it, like something waiting to be filled. Over the next few days, I unpacked slowly, deliberately. I filled the kitchen with ceramic mugs from roadside shops. I stocked the pantry with oatmeal and dried beans and my favorite brand of tea that no one else ever liked. I strung soft lights along the porch and lined the windowsills with rocks Hank had collected from places we'd visited over the years. I didn't need much. Every object had to earn its place. One afternoon, I drove into town and opened a small checking account at the local credit union. The teller, a young woman named Carla, asked me if I was new to the area. I smiled, just starting fresh. She nodded and said, "Good time of year to do that. Everything's changing." I bought groceries, a broom, a set of kitchen knives, a quilt from the general store, hand-stitched by a woman named Lorraine, who chatted with me about apple preserves and the fall fair coming up. She didn't ask where I'd come from. She didn't need to. It was enough that I was here. And slowly, the rhythms of this new life began to take hold. I started walking every morning, short loops at first, then longer trails into the woods behind my property. I'd stop by the stream and toss in a pebble, just like Hank used to. Some days, I'd talk to him, not out loud, just in the quiet places of my mind, where he still lived. I planted bulbs along the back fence, daffodils and tulips. It was too late in the season, probably. They might not take. But I didn't mind. It felt good to put something in the ground again. At night, I sat by the fire and read books I hadn't touched in years. I made soup from scratch. I didn't check my email. The phone rang once. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. No message. I didn't feel the need to wonder who it was. There was nothing left I needed from the past. This place, this quiet, creaky, slightly imperfect cabin, was not an escape. It was a beginning. And each day I stayed, each nail in the wall, each pot on the stove, each cup of coffee brewed just the way I liked it, became part of the foundation I was building. Not on grief, not on revenge, but on the undeniable truth that I had survived. And now, I was choosing to live. It started with a knock at my door, a soft one, hesitant. I opened it to find a girl, no more than 16, standing on my porch with a backpack slung over one shoulder and a binder clutched to her chest. She looked startled to see me. Her eyes darted to the porch swing, then to the pine trees behind me. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I thought this was the old ranger cabin. I was looking for Mr. Dewey?" I smiled. "He moved out last year. I live here now." "Oh." She paused, awkward. "Sorry to bother you." "You're not." I gestured to her binder. "Homework?" She nodded. "AP Civics. I was supposed to meet a study group out here. I think I got the address wrong." Something in her voice, hurried, brittle, reminded me of Meredith at that age, all nerves and ambition, trying too hard not to need help. "Want to ride back into town?" I offered. She hesitated, then said, "That'd be great. Thank you." Her name was Haley. Over the course of the 10-minute drive, I learned she lived with her grandmother, worked weekends at the diner, and had dreams of getting into college somewhere far, far away. "Not because I hate it here," she said quickly, like a reflex. "Just, I want more, you know?" I nodded. I did know. The next week, I dropped off some old study guides at the high school. Nobody asked me to. I just did it. The guidance counselor, a sharp-eyed woman named Miss Alvarez, called to thank me. "We don't get many retirees around here who offer that kind of help," she said. "Want to come speak at Career Day?" I laughed. "Career? I'm a former housewife with a well-organized spice rack." "Well, our students could use some of that too." So I went. I stood in front of 23 teenagers and told them the truth, that life will not go how you plan, that the people you trust may fail you, that strength isn't about outlasting others, it's about knowing when to start again. After that, it snowballed. I started volunteering twice a week, first with the school library, then with a senior outreach group that paired retirees with local kids who needed tutoring or mentorship. I helped write resumes, edited college essays, baked cookies for fundraisers, gave a few quiet rides to a girl whose mom was in rehab. None of it was flashy, none of it made headlines, but it stitched something back together in me. One afternoon, Haley stopped by after school with a letter in her hand. I invited her in for tea. "It's from Rutgers," she said. "I got in." I beamed. "Of course you did." Her eyes watered. "I couldn't have done it without you." "You did all the work," I said gently. "I just reminded you it mattered." That night, I opened the fireproof box I'd kept in the back of my closet Hank's cash, still mostly untouched. I took out a thick envelope and wrote Haley's name on it. Inside, I included a note. For books, buses, and whatever you need to start clean. From someone who knows how hard it is to leave and how important it is to try. It wasn't just about her. It was about giving forward what I could never give back, to Hank, to my younger self, to the decades I'd spent putting others first. And it felt good. Not vengeful, not righteous, just right. In planting something new, I wasn't erasing the past. I was grounding it, letting it feed something better. The letter came on a rainy Thursday in late spring. I almost didn't check the mailbox, too busy steeping tea and prepping garden beds. But something nudged me, and there it was, a cream envelope with my name in Brian's handwriting. Still neat, still too formal, like he was writing to a colleague instead of his mother. I carried it inside but didn't open it right away. I knew what it would say. It sat on the counter while I tended the herbs on the windowsill, swept pine needles off the porch, and fed the blue jays near the trellis. Only after the kettle had whistled and the rain softened did I sit down and slit it open. Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Truly. For everything. I've had a lot of time to think. We both have. Meredith and I barely speak now. Chase left. Vanessa's gone. It's just quiet. I look back and I don't know who I was during that time. I think I told myself we were helping you. Maybe I even believed it. But I see now we were just circling something we thought we could control. And when we couldn't, we turned on you. You didn't deserve that. Dad didn't deserve that. And I'll carry that with me, whether you ever speak to me again or not. I hope you're safe. I hope you're somewhere peaceful. I hope one day, when you're ready, you'll let me know you're okay. Love, Brian. I read it once, then again, and then I folded it and placed it in a drawer, not out of spite, not out of vengeance, but because I had nothing left to prove. He had chosen his path, and now I had chosen mine. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the stream with Hank's old compass in my pocket, the one he used on every hiking trip, even when we weren't far from home. I sat on the mossy rock we used to share and watched the water pass by, fast in some places, gentle in others, but always moving. That was the thing about rivers. They didn't flow backward, they didn't wait, and neither would I. Not for apologies, not for resolution, not for anyone to finally see me. I had already seen myself. I had built a life out of ashes and pine and silence and seeds, and it was good. Enough. More than enough. I stood, brushed the moss from my hands, and walked back up the hill as the sky cleared and sunlight broke through the clouds. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt light.